Let's start with general information. Pirate Warriors 3 was released on March 26, 2015 for the PS4, PS3, PS Vita, PC a while later, and Switch port in 2018 that included all DLC, which is how I originally played the game, but for this video I recorded it on the PC version, which I think you should probably avoid, but I'll discuss it later in the video. I suppose I should start with the visuals of the game, which are mostly based on the PS3 version of the game, and even then the PC port doesn't clean up the visuals that much, comparing it to the actual PS3 version or even the Switch version. Textures are fine, but they look kinda iffy sometimes, like there's one in the third level. Frame rate is rock solid, even when the action gets heavy with dozens of enemies on screen and a bunch of effects, cause this game gets flashy. The art style itself is faithful to One Piece designs. I think it isn't the best way this world has looked in video game form. Other games released after this have more graphical fidelity, like its sequel, and it doesn't beat Unlimited World Red as my favorite art style, which looks gorgeous, but it still looks good enough in my opinion. Characters look basically like you would imagine One Piece character looking in 3D, with outlines and even different shading effects in some places, but sometimes the expressions don't translate as well, like look at Luffy's mouth. And then there's characters like Caesar. What the hell am I looking at? The character models themselves look good, with the subpar textures of the game sometimes going over them. One quirk that I noticed about the PC version was the characters sometimes have on their bodies what I can best describe as air bubbles, like when plastic that's supposed to be airtight ends up with air inside of it, like these books I have. I don't really know why it happens, and I've only seen it happen to PC port. It's a bit distracting, especially in cases where the actual models are shoved in your face. Also for Logia characters, when they enter Kizuna Rush and enter Logia state, they have an effect that depends on what type of Logia fruit they ate. The only time that I think it looks weird is with Kuzan, and that's only in the Switch version. For gameplay itself, like I said, frame rate never seems to dip, and it has a lot of effects that make the combat much more satisfying. Especially a special move that has Thanks also to the sound. Obviously it adds another layer to how fun the combat is, but I'm more interested in the music, because man does this soundtrack rock. It does have a few tracks from previous Pirate Warriors games, and in terms of level themes, I'll talk more about it when it's relevant in the story discussion, but jumping the gun a bit here, I honestly really dig the soundtrack. I'm good to pump the blood during gameplay and good to listen outside of gameplay when I'm editing or investing in Bitcoin. So yeah, in summary, the graphics of the PC version are mixed. I think that the visuals are mostly pleasant, nothing that looks that bad, but it could definitely look better. And it does on newer hardware, but that's besides the point. The soundtrack, however, is pretty good, almost entirely great, aside from a couple of tracks. And maybe you can say it doesn't count for this game since a lot of great tracks are from previous Pirate Warriors games, and you might be correct, but the fact you can play the game with that selection of tunes, I mean, you gotta count for something, right? Pirate Warriors is a 3D action game, but it isn't something like DMC, Bayonetta, or more personally relevant, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. As the Warriors in the name suggests, it's a spin-off of the Warriors, or Muso as I'll be referring to it, franchise created by Koei Tecmo. Starting in 2000 with Dynasty Warriors 2, cause one was a fighting game, so no one talking about Dynasty Warriors, and it revolves around the Romans of the Three Kingdoms in China. It'll eventually spun out in different sub-series, with Koei's own Samurai Warriors based on the Sengoku period of Japan, Warriors Orochi, a crossover of Dynasty and Samurai Warriors, and a bunch of licensed games, covering properties like Mobile Suit Gundam, Berserk, Zelda, the topic of today's video, One Piece, Persona 5, Fire Emblem, Fist of the North Star. Point is, the Warriors formula is something that has spread into a lot of licenses and IPs. So what is said formula? In short, Muso games revolve around you beating the living hell of an army of enemies. The definition of a one-man army. You select a character, use their usually simple combo pool, and tear through the enemy opposition. It isn't very complex, especially during its first outing back in Y2K. I guess you can consider it a cousin of the Spectacle Fighter. I think nowadays it's a bit more apparent. But when it first came out, seeing as Dante's Bizarre Adventure was 1 year away, it was more like an old school beat 'em up in the arcades, and like those games, it was / maybe is a bit of a button masher. I'm sure you can engage with the nuances of combat system and really learn how to use the characters effectively, but I'd be lying if I told you just mashing the X button didn't give you results. Now, obviously future Muso games, mainline or otherwise, have built over this foundation, adding more layers to the combat. But these games, at the end of the day, you don't have it like other games where you have a large pool of defensive, movement, and offensive abilities. You got attacks, maybe a block or dodge in the case of Pirate Warriors. Best of luck. But I'd say these are also power fantasies. Getting to beat an entire army and seeing the kill count in the corner does make you feel invincible. Honestly, it doesn't have to be simple just via Power Fantasy. Doom can also be considered one, and it can get plenty difficult, and other action games do depend on mastery of the mechanics to make you feel and look awesome. But sometimes, you just want the easy solution. What cook a gourmet meal when you just feel like ordering a hamburger? Now, I'm not an expert on Musou games, I haven't played that many, so I'm more so talking as a casual player rather than a hardcore one. For standard Musou, I mean, not Pirate Warriors. This video will discuss Pirate Warriors combat in depth, or attempt to, anyway. So the combat in this game is, on the surface, not that deep. You have a 5-hit light combo and a 3-hit heavy combo. Since I play this game on PC with a DualShock 4, I'll be referring to these as square and triangle, same if you're playing on PS4. Or if you're playing on Switch, Y for light and X for heavy combos. To perform them with the light and heavy attacks, you need to press square or triangle a certain amount of times, and then press the heavy attack for light combos or the light attack for heavy combos. This is slightly different from other Musou games, where the heavy attack run is instead an action rather than a combo. Each character has the same input, so it's easier to jump into them if you've never played a certain character. I think I'll just show you the inputs on screen rather than telling you, but as you can see, even though the moves are different since they are different characters, the commands are the same. There aren't any other inputs, like pressing X and then after a quick pause, pressing X again compared to mashing X, or an attack if you press X during dash, or even holding the X button to get a different attack. Damn, I played a lot of Assault Spy. There's also the L action, which depending on the character you're playing as, could mean an extra attack, a charge attack, an attack that supports that character's moveset, a defensive move, or just whatever the designer felt like doing that day. Remember I said that regular Musou had a heavy attack be more so a special action? Well, jumping ahead a bit, in Pirate Warriors 4, what the L action would be is instead the triangle button, like Luffy's pistol. Obviously each character has a special quirk, maybe like an elemental effect or whatnot, but I'll discuss it once I get to character discussion. You can perform a special attack by pressing circle, or A on Switch, that you need to have a certain amount of special attack gauge filled in order to perform, and that attack can only use 1 bar of the gauge, or use 2 bars once you've upgraded the character with coins. This attack can stun enemies in front of you, signified by them turning yellow. The radius depends on the attack, so some characters have a large radius and some have a smaller one. It isn't super useful with regular fodder, but with larger enemies, it can keep them from moving so you can deal damage. And the attacks also create shockwaves that knock out enemies that are farther away from the attack, and sends flying all enemies in the vicinity. Another thing to point out is that the game has almost zero aerial combat, save for the launcher attacks that catapult enemies into the air in a different way depending on the character. This all goes on with the square triangle triangle combo. I also kinda wish that the heavy combo was 5 inputs rather than 3, but I see that more as a minuscule nitpick rather than an actual flaw. You can also lock into enemies with L2, only to be used with larger enemies. Now, the system by itself is, at least to me, a solid combat system. You have enough variety in combos so it doesn't feel too repetitive too fast. The combat is visually very satisfying, because of how each combo knocks away a bunch of enemies. As a Musou game, it's all about defeating as many enemies as possible. The attacks have a very large range, regardless if it's a sword swing, a punch, or dropping a nuke on the enemies, but I think there are extra options that elevate the combat a bit further. Firstly, there is a dash button. You can perform a dash when you press X on a DualShock or B on Switch, and you can hold it to run, since there isn't a horse or any other means to get to places. But I find it better that way, since I can always go fast and not dependent on some horse, while your actual walk speed is total molasses. But the important thing is a dash. In the tutorial page for your dash, it said that if you've done a combo, dash, and then immediately press the corresponding button, you can keep the combo going. This is very important. This works for a variety of reasons. For one, since in normal play most regular fodder die in like 3 hits once you're buffed enough, you can push them into another group of enemies to then continue your combo and rack up the KOs. But it'll also depend on how far the dash will go. I found this a bit inconsistent since sometimes it didn't take you very far while pushing a group of enemies, other times it pushed you much further, and sometimes it just skipped past them. But there's also the enemy shield. When fighting a strong enemy, basically any named character, they can enter a stance where they become immune to your attacks, and if you keep hitting them, they'll stagger you, breaking your combo. Now you can break their stance with a special attack, if you're a normie, but you can break their stance while performing a combo and then dashing into them. Also, I think dashing into enemies carries a bit of damage, and since you can dash after your first input, it isn't very risky to hit them and dash into them, and then breaking their stance. But then there's one last benefit to the dash. You can use it at any moment and it will cancel the attack you're doing. Doesn't matter if you're in the air, your character will just teleport to the ground and even teleport back up into the air if you continue your combo and it happens to be in the air. Not only can you cancel an attack chain if you need to book it, but each time you finish a combo, there's also a small animation that stops you from immediately attacking again. It takes like a second, but you can also cancel that and immediately go back into the offensive. So this will allow you to juggle large enemies and combo their asses into oblivion. It's nuts. And then you can cancel animations if your action is already triggered, like the beginning of Zoro's L action for example. You can cancel it and make things quicker. There's also the Kizuna Rush. While damaging enemies, you not only fill their special attack gauge, but you also fill this bar on the left of your character's portrait. This bar was introduced in Pirate Warriors 2, but this game changes it with the ally system. You see that there's someone peeking under the bar? That's an ally you can call at the end of your combos as a sort of finisher. They have another use in combat which involves these exclamation marks that are one of the 3 criteria for getting S ranks. The Kizuna Rush has 3 levels, and once you reach level 2 of the bar, you can end your combo with an attack by your ally by pressing either the square or triangle button, depending on the attack. And this will add you those exclamation points, one for each enemy you defeat, and extra if it's a larger enemy, like a commander or a strong enemy. Once the gauge is full, you can press the right trigger and activate Kizuna Rush. If I can compare it to something, it might be like Devil Trigger in DMC, or more personally relevant, Jack the Ripper mode in Metal Gear Rising, where it's a save that jacks up your damage and depending on the character, it will also have a different status effect. So each character has in their name 2 effects. Most of them are simple stuff like doing more damage to a specific type of enemy, having more damage or defense, that kind of stuff. Going to a Kinemer or Royal Disposition, which is exclusive to the characters that have Conqueror's Haki and does damage to enemies by just standing near them. And not much, but the other effect, Paramecia, makes the characters attack faster. And since it's used by characters with Paramecia type fruits, that's like 14 out of 35 playable characters that are much faster during the Kizuna Rush. But wait, we're not done. There's also an effect trigger depending on what character you activate it with, and I think most and not all are based on quotes said by characters relating to the effect. If you pair 2 characters that are teammates, be it Marine or Pirate, you get Can You Call Me a Crewmate, which increases the amount of time you spend in Kizuna Rush. If you pair someone who help each other, it's thanks for everything, making it so you don't take damage during Kizuna Rush. I guess it's helpful even if by the time you're leveled up enough, enemies don't even damage you. If the pairing are rivals, you get I'll be better than you. And with it you can stun enemies much quicker. Love is always a Hurricane is definitely the most limited and least useful. With it, your Kizuna level increases by 1 if you deactivate it early. Basically, instead of starting at level 1, if you turn it off before the bar depletes, instead you start at level 2, which you can already do if you press L2 again before it depletes. So... And the only characters that can use it are Sanji with any women and Hancock with any character except Luffy, Chopper, and Fujitora for different reasons. I think also Alvida can use it, but I don't know exactly what activates it with her. And finally, You're All My Family, which as the name implies, is the effect when you pair 2 characters who are family, though fun enough only 2 characters that have this effect are blood related. This will only happen with Whitebeard and his commanders, and Luffy with Ace, Sabo, and Garp, and it allows you to slow down time considerably. Now this sounds pretty good, but it isn't as useful as it sounds, since larger enemies are invincible while knocked out on the floor, while they activate their own Kizuna Rush, or just take a while to get to the floor when they're flying up. That means it'll take a while to damage them again. It can be useful, but it's also a bit of a double-edged sword. Also, each ally has a chance to activate their hero power. It's random whether or not you get it, I think, but it makes it so you can charge your Kizuna gauge faster. And it also adds 1 more level to the max, which takes its purple color. Once full, the hero power is activated and you get a different effect depending on the character. I won't go into detail about it since sometimes it makes allies stronger, makes enemies weaker, that kind of stuff. The only noteworthy ones are those that can shoot projectiles across the entire battlefield, like Smoker, Lucci, Akainu, Kusan, etc. And finally, yes, I know, if you press the special attack button, you will perform a combination of special attacks from you and your allies. So if you already have 4 allies, which is the limit you can have active at once, you basically have 5 special attacks, which, as you expect, damn! Kicks 9 yards of ass. Well, that was a lot to take in. Even with all I talked about, I don't think this combat system is that complex. The most mechanically complex part is the dash move, and even then, it's fairly simple to get the grips with. The rest is probably more deep than an average player just playing the story mode and a few Dreamlock missions, but for those who decide to engage with the combat and get to the nitty gritty of it, it can be satisfying. Let me talk a bit about the enemies before moving on. Obviously you can have the best combat system in the world, but if you don't have the meat bags to use it on, what's the point? The center enemies are the foot soldiers, bottom of the food chain. Their damage is peanuts, and the most interesting thing going for it is they sometimes change depending on the missions. They can be pirates, marines, snow soldiers, fishmen, zombies, these lobby dudes, and they can carry swords, rifles, or bazookas. When you capture an enemy territory, if it becomes blue, the enemies inside of it will become nervous, signified by their empty health bars. If you do a certain attack, these enemies will be sent flying by the same shockwave as a special attack, which is also signified by the red Japanese symbol. I suppose it's denoting that enemies were sent flying by the shockwave? I don't think the game properly explains what these are. At least I never saw any mention of them in tutorials. These are the majority of enemies you'll be taking down. Since Moose is about taking down an entire army, the regular fire should be easy to defeat. And also since, well, basically that's what you do in the show. A single attack, even pre-time skip, could send dozens of these marine schmucks flying like they're paper clips. So it's fitting that One Piece has a Musu series. Then we got commanders. These are beefier enemies that you can lock onto, so they are definitely intended to be focused on, since either way your attacks are big and wide enough that you take regular enemies on the way. They can be the aforementioned classes, though aside from the dudes with bazookas and the dudes with long weapons, there are also the giant variants. These are bigger and they're much harder to stun. And Nightmare Log and higher difficulties, these guys take so much damage to put down, even in Kizuna Rush. And finally we got the strong enemies. These are basically the enemies that are actual named characters, playable or otherwise. These are also the ones that give you coins that buff your stats. They can block your attacks, which you can bypass by dashing into them or by grabbing them. And if it's an end of level fight in Legend Log or Dream Log, they have a segmented life bar. I guess so that you don't kill them with a single attack with your level 70 Tashigi. And in the story mode, they have a special attack that can cover a good chunk of the arena. And sometimes they have an extra move or two, like Lucci's healing move, which is 10 tons of push. And if you defeat a strong enemy during the Kizuna Rush, you get extra coins. The coins are useful for leveling up your character, since the normal levels will only take you so far, and they can also increase your special attack bars and skill slot. They also serve to break a character's level limit and unlock special attacks, but I'll talk more about them later. You can also add skills to a character. You have a limited amount of slots to add skills. Imagine something like Hollow Knight's charm system. These can range from character specific, like Mantra for Nell, Gorgon Eyes for Hancock, Essence of Sand Power for Crocodile, so on. Enhancement for actions or combos, letting you charge attacks faster, increasing damage or defense every 500 kills, or something like Captain's Wisdom that charges your special attack gauge automatically. There's some that I initially didn't see much use for, like the one that makes enemies take more damage in the air in a game with no aerial combat. These allow for a bit of customization since its usefulness can depend on what character you're using. Like for example, only a few characters can charge attacks, so it's only to them that the quick charge skill is useful. To cover what's level combat, I should talk about character specific quirks. So that's a good segue into character discussion. The game has a roster of 37 characters, not counting that some characters have different movesets depending on the costume, and that includes quite a bit of fan favorites and even some neat inclusions that were sadly omitted from the successor. I'll go over all of them, but not everyone will be described in equal detail. You don't need an extensive thesis on why Ace sucks. Luffy is probably, definitely the character that most people will immediately gravitate towards. So he had to be pretty fun to use. And he is. He has an attack that launches enemies with an axe and then beats them with a Gatling gun in the air. I'm not saying Gomu Gomu because I don't want to repeat it like 20 times in the script, and I'm not saying Gum Gum because I'm not demented. Well, maybe a little. His rain attack that gets followed by the spear is my go-to attack pre-time skip. His rocket is pretty good to take out a straight line of enemies if you don't want to use his special attack, and his storm attack works if the enemies are too spread apart. His grab isn't too noteworthy, but the second heavy combo, Whip, then Bullet and Balloon, is pretty good. Second most used attack between pre and post time skip. Yeah, I should talk about that. A lot of characters have versions from before the time skip and after the time skip in One Piece. A lot of them have changed looks between these periods, nicknamed New World costumes, but a few characters, Blackbeard and the Straw Hats, have changed movesets to reflect that. Since during the time skip they all grow in abilities and powers, all the post time skip movesets are vastly superior. Now, all characters aren't too underpowered. Nami's actually pretty similar. Robin has a lot of weaker attacks, and her special attack might as well be throwing pebbles at enemies. Usopp has a pretty good special attack, but moveset wise isn't that fire. Chopper. We don't talk about Chopper. Brook can't freeze enemies, and Frankie has a mechanic that he needs to restock his cola every few attacks, or they become weaker, and at some point you can't even perform them at all. And it doesn't really bring anything interesting to the table, just pressing L every so often. So I'll just talk about the New World versions of every character, even if I have to ditch the Any Slotty look for Robin. Oh yeah, that was about Luffy. Post-time skip moveset changes a few things, like the rocket was changed to the Grizzly Magnum, which is the best attack for Luffy. It packs a huge punch, it feels a lot of the Kizuna gauge, and you don't even have to charge it like the rocket. The cannon at the end of the light combo was changed to a giant pistol, and the storm was changed to a UFO, which is still spammable. His L action is a pistol. Pre-time skip can be charged for more power, but it was too sluggish to be a combo finisher, cause it can cancel the attacks. Post-time skip is a jet variant, which is faster and can be charged for a triple shot. I mentioned it with the rocket, but Luffy can't charge attacks, which some characters can do, but Luffy is the only one that can charge his attacks before a combo, or in certain attacks that can create a button press for more power, like the rocket, the axe, or the hammer. The Kizuna Rush also adds a few extra attacks, or extend the duration of already existing ones, and in the case of Luffy it changes some entirely. The giant pistol was changed to the elephant gun, and the jet pistol was changed to the snake shot, but it can't be charged anymore. Pre-time skip add attacks like the flail, the mallet, and the bazooka during his aerial windmill. Kizuna Rush attacks for Luffy post-time skip are the jet pistol, hawk rifle, etc. I discussed some of the New World changes since he's probably the one you'll play the most with his pre-time skip moveset due to the story. There's also the matter of Luffy's overdrive. In a couple of Kizuna rushes, like Usopp and Luffy's, the character has a special overdrive that changes a bit of their attacks. Luffy has a second gear. Luffy has only a second gear since this game was released a bit before Gear 4 was introduced, and that's a fish that Pirate Warriors 4 has to fry. He obviously takes his second gear look, becoming a more pinkish color and letting off steam. I think he may or may not get a speed increase since he's a Paramecia type fruit user. He already had it, but his animations might be playing tricks on me. Pre-time skip Luffy also gets Jet Pistol only in Kizuna Rush, and one attack does change. The Gatling gun goes from walking to staying in one place. I think I like Luffy as much as I do cause he's really fun to use the dash with. It's not like a dumb reason, but you won't get that from every character. And finally, his special attacks, Rifle and Gears are for his pre-moveset. Rifle is pretty good and Gears is fine, but it makes Luffy smaller for a bit, which doesn't make it as useful to me. Post moveset has Red Hawk and Elephant Gatling Gun, which are very good even if I only use the Elephant Gun despite the fact it is double the cost. Don't worry, the character breakdown won't be as detailed for everyone, just the ones I like. Damn it. So where we start to see that there was clearly a favored moveset between pre-time skip and post-time skip characters. And he also has attacks that I actually prefer from his post-time skip variants. You see, some of the characters that have different movesets also have the issue of reusing certain attacks. Like Zoro, he has his Onigiri attack as his finisher and another combo. Sanji has two attacks where he throws enemies into the sky and launches a storm of kicks upwards. Well, he also uses a couple of attacks, but we'll open the can of worms when we get to it. Anyways, Zoro has a pretty cool moveset. His attacks feel very vicious compared to other Zoro in the roster. Pre-time skip is one of the only characters that I'd say he's not that far off from his post variant. He's pretty fun. Of course, I'll only use this one when I'm in the story mode and I don't have other options. One of the attacks I actually prefer is his third light combo. His blue fire thing might actually be better, but his pre-time skip attack has more oomph to it. His New World moveset incorporates his 9 sword style in light combo, while his pre-moveset had it as his special attack, which Zoro isn't too hot in that sense. They pack a punch, but they are limited in range, basically whatever's in front of you. And I only use his Purgatory Onigiri when I'm not using pre-time skip Zoro, which uses 2 bars of his special attack gauge. He also has a very spammable skill with his first heavy combo that makes him spin around with his swords, cause most people I've seen using Zoro on videos spam this one a lot. I wonder if these games are not as crowded as people say. His L action is either Death Lion Song or this move that I don't remember the name of. The post variant is maybe better because it attracts enemies even if it's in the air, and it also damages ground enemies, but come on. Death Lion Song is so much more badass. I'm gonna be more brief with other characters, so next one is Nami. She's okay. I think I might save you more time telling you that you can have fun with almost every character. Even if they have their quirks and such, they all have the same inputs, so it's easy to jump to other characters. Unlike other titles where you have to learn entirely new playstyles, combos, and have slightly changed the way you approach combat. So Nami uses a climb attack. She can make clouds that can shoot thunder, and she has certain attacks that make clouds spawn above enemies and you can make them shoot lightning by pressing L, though there's an attack that does that for you. The special attacks aren't too hot. The first one feels a bit weak, it lacks impact, and the second one, well, it's more powerful and it can charge a lot of the Kisuna gauge if you play it right, but also lacks a bit of impact. Her pre-time skip ones were somehow better. Usopp has something similar. His special attack, Impact Wolf, has good coverage in terms of length. This one reaches quite far, but it isn't as powerful. And his background attack launches enemies into the air, which is fine, but I generally don't like characters like this. He has a very projectile heavy moveset. He's still fine, but in a game where melee combat is a focus and you have someone with projectiles, Sanji. Okay, Sanji on his own, he's fun. He has a couple of repeated attacks, which is a bit lame since they're both launchers that only attack enemies that are above you, i.e. the ones you throw into the air. You know, every character has an attack that launches enemies into the air. It's always the first combo, which gives use to the skill I mentioned earlier that gives extra damage to enemies suspended in the air. I mean, I don't use launchers that much, but I digress. His first heavy combo does spin in the air that doesn't do damage for some reason. I mean, he's still fun to play, but, and this is a huge Kaido-sized but, he has a big problem. He can't hit women. And to any normal person on the street, I will sound extremely psychotic, but in trying to be accurate to the source material, Sanji can't harm women. He just backs off like when you hit a strong enemy while it's blocking. Now during the legend log, Sanji is only available in missions where you don't have to fight women. Screw that. In Alabasta, you have to use Sanji to 100% it, and you have to fight Tachiki and Robin. But anyway, it's a bigger problem during the dream log where you don't know if any women are going to appear. And even then, they can invade the battle in any moment. The only way you can dish out pain is if they are hit by a shockwave or by Sanji's second special attack, Hell's Memories, that launches enemies into the air, but also makes a pillar of fire that damages the chumps below. So there is a way around it, but still, it's a bit hard to play as a guy. Special attacks, okay, General Watch Your Step is fine, I guess. A bit too long, and his other special attack is pretty strong. Though sometimes the camera just goes into the cinematic position that it has for every single character, and sometimes just go behind the character like it's normal gameplay. And it happens only to this special attack, to only this character. Weird. Brook can use his music to put enemies to sleep, but his post-time skip variant can also freeze enemies. But he also has worse special attacks. Nothing terrible, but I prefer his pre-special attacks a bit more. Otherwise, he's okay. I think maybe I should speed things up even more. Buggy is okay. He has a cool gimmick of swinging his hand to attack a group of enemies, and then you can continue to kick someone else's nuts. And his Buggy Ball is pretty strong. Mihawk is pretty fun. His gimmick is that every time you do a standard light or heavy combo, meaning if you press the same button 5 or 3 times respectively, his sword charges up. You can charge it up to 3 levels, making his attacks more powerful each level. His combos also change slightly, becoming more devastating as well. There is also an easy way to charge it a bit. His L action is a dash that automatically charges his sword faster, without having to input basic light or heavy combos. You can still charge it further, or go with it as is. His first special attack, Black Blade Wild Slashes, has more range, so it's more useful for bigger hordes of enemies, but his Black Blade Void does more damage, so it's better for stronger enemies. I suppose with his big ass sword, he would be a more heavy playstyle, but he's no less agile than Sora, say. Crocodile has a move that can steal enemies' health into the zone, which is cool, not much else to say. During his Kisuna Rush, he can use the poison on his hook to further damage enemies. I don't know why it isn't just a move where he poisons enemies. He also has one of them countered that during the Kisuna Rush is just a regular attack. Perona can use her ghost to give people depression, which you can only do with heavy combos, and if they're depressed enough, you can press L and poof them away to Brazil. She's all about shooting little ghosts and occasionally hitting enemies with your teddy bear. That's probably full of bricks. Gekomura can place enemies in his black box, which with the right skill can make them take a lot more damage, and also steals enemy shadows to fill up his gauge, which as far as I'm aware, powerful I think. He can also call his minions for a couple of attacks, but being honest, he's one of the characters I have less fun with. His heavy attacks leave him very vulnerable, so those are rarely viable. Even his special attacks aren't that good compared to others, he's just kinda eh. Blackbeard is the only character aside from the Straw Hats to have different movesets depending on what costume you wear. And he changes between his Yami Yami no Mi moveset and the one where he shares it with the Gura Gura no Mi, Whitebeard's fruit. He also shares one of Whitebeard's special attacks, even though in Blackbeard's case, it's his first special attack as opposed to Whitebeard where it's his second special attack. This makes him one of the few characters where I think both special attacks are extremely effective. He's one of the most annoying characters to fight against though, since his pitch black star not only does a lot of damage, but sends you flying. Not to mention he can pull you closer or suck you into the ground. He runs kinda funny, like he's rapidly approaching your location. Doflamingo can use strengths to control enemies, and one move allows him to restrain them so he can charge his Conqueror's Haki. But maybe it's a bit weaker compared to the other character that also charges his Haki. Even if he has the advantage of keeping his enemies still while charging, he also has the combination of Paramecia and Roller Disposition, so he's a lot faster and does damage to enemies around him while in Kizuna Rush. But I found it to be even faster for some reason. Other than that, Overheating and Birdcage has some pretty solid special attacks, and he has this one attack, his first heavy move, where he slashes with giant strings, but I feel like it's something misses the enemies right in front of me. I could be wrong though. Law is another one of my top characters. Every time you attack he creates a room, which is the only way he can dish out the pain. Even hitting enemies with your sword does little damage, but he can be far from his room and he'll still do damage to enemies inside it. He automatically creates a room when attacking, but you can also press L to make one, which is a lot better because it's slightly bigger and attracts enemies. His first heavy combo is pretty good, but also pretty spammable, where he does his counter shock to enemies. His third attack, whatever it is, fills a lot of the Kizuna gauge. His other attacks are also pretty good, like the one where he swaps the enemy's heads for explosives. Yeah, T for teens. His first special attack, Scalpel, is fine, but his second special attack is very good. It's instant damage over a large area, mimicking when he destroyed the SAD production in Punk Hazard. Overall, one of my favorite characters to play as. Hancock is also one of my favorites, but you don't have as much to talk about. She can turn her enemies into stone with the exception of Luffy, Fujitora, and Chopper. Her third light combo is the same as her fourth, but with only one hard arrow instead of several, so her third combo is basically obsolete in my books. She also has a counter that gets turned into a regular attack during Kizuna Rush. Another victim. Her slave error isn't that great, but Perfume Farmer makes up for it. This thing shoots the Kizuna gauge up the clouds. She's one of the first characters I began to main, aside from Luffy and Tashigi, and I don't know, maybe it's her simple but fun moveset, maybe how fun it is to slap enemies with his name. Jinbei is one of the slowest characters, but he also feels like a powerhouse. His heavy attacks are molasses, but it's fun seeing him hitting people with fish. Vagabond Cannon is a pretty good special move. I used to not like him that much, but once I got over the fact that he was a much slower character, since I normally prefer things to be faster, he's pretty fun. Marco is the only one with a semblance of aerial combat, since almost if not all of his attacks launch enemies into the air. And so, he's the only one that the aerial knowledge skill is useful to, since almost every character can launch enemies with one attack. His Phoenix Fires are pretty cool, allowing him to heal with his special attacks, so he's a bit more unique than other characters. Next is Ace. Dude, just play Sapo. Ace has fire powers, so he has a couple of cool attacks, but his first special attack ain't too hot. And the second one is an improvement, but it has an extremely weird issue. I don't know if I can illustrate it here, but doing the same motion with the analog stick, you can see that it has different movement. And worst movement at that. With a few tweaks, he would be better to play as, but as is, it's probably just superior. Like in Actual 1, Whitebeard might be one of the most powerful characters, using his Gora Gora no Mi to cause earthquakes. It just looks awesome whenever this cracking effect appears. And he has a planet's worth of oomph. He's a bit slower, but he's a tank. Really fun to use even if you prefer speedy characters, like I do. Shanks is another one of my favorites, and also one of the most powerful characters. He has certain attacks that can imbue his sword with Haki, though it looks more like pinkish flames. His L action appears to slow on time, never really find a use for it, surprisingly. His second heavy combo has him using his Call of Conqueror, and all his attack does is just walking slowly, killing his enemies only with his Giga Chad energy. His fourth light combo is just exploding the ground, and his first heavy combo is a charged up blast of Conqueror's Haki. It makes you a sitting duck, but when you charge it enough during the Kizuna Rush, oh boy. His first special attack is really good, but his second one, to the heights of piracy, just skyrockets his Kizuna gauge. Ah, so good. And you know, I like his normal attire, but I also ask,
does it come in black?
Now we get to Tashiki, possibly my favorite character in the game. At first, it doesn't look like a fun character, but once you get the hang of dash cancelling, she becomes top tier. Her first light combo has its uses. The second light combo is a flurry of slashes, which is great for keeping enemies still. Her third light combo helps a lot when filling the Kizuna gauge, and her fourth light combo doesn't make much sense why she's using it. It looks a lot like Mihawk, so I actually thought that she was somehow trained by Mihawk during the time skip. I didn't know at the time that it was Zoro who was trained by Mihawk, but whatever. And it's good for doing damage while you go fight other enemies next to you. The first heavy combo is very good, but it's only worth a damn in its Kisune's extended version. And the second heavy combo is one of my most utilized. Her L action, surprisingly, has different variants depending on the inputs. If you press it at the end of an attack, she slams her sword into the ground. If you do that, but push the stick in any direction, she does a forward slash in said direction. And if you press L while not attacking, you'll do a really powerful slash. Since it takes a bit for her to get the sword out of its scabbard, or saya, whatever, it does limit its usefulness, but when you do put it right, yeah, like I said, using dash canceling with her, she becomes pretty fast and very fun to use. The first character I grinded up to level 100 on Switch, and how I complete the dream locks, so yeah, she's pretty good. Smoker is okay. He can slow down enemies with a smoke, they even fall slower. His special attacks are mostly focused on damage to a small group rather than spanning a large area, which I suppose is good when fighting strong enemies. Garp sometimes feels like a wrestler. He can grab enemies with various attacks, which makes him good at bypassing the shields strong enemies use. With L, he can throw a cannonball. And his attacks? Well, you're basically a licensed chiropractor because some of these attacks, oh boy. Like the boss said,
let's rearrange some architecture, Countess.
Except in this case it's the enemy's bone structure. Kizaru is the only other character that can knock enemies into the air with a good chunk of his attacks, though not to the degree of Marco. He can shoot lasers that explode, and while both special attacks leave some to be desired, I think he is still fun to play as. Fujitora is... what else can I say? He's probably the most powerful marine in the game. I mean, just his L action is a charge meter that might as well be a goddamn nuke. That is probably more powerful than the special attacks of 50% of the roster. His attacks are also pretty solid. His first special attack opens a hole in the ground, and his second special attack might as well be called Armageddon. And in Kisuna Rush, most of his attacks end up dropping one or more meteors onto enemies. The amount of catharsis I get from playing as him due to how powerful he is, I mean, roll the clip again. Akainu is good, I'd say. The bastard can make volcanoes on the floor and make them erupt, which does quite a bit of damage. Both special attacks are pretty effective at killing enemies. Right, Ace? Ace? Nah, he's sleeping. And Eru... yep, that's vomit. He has a gimmick of charging lightning into enhance certain attacks, and you can charge it with his first and second heavy combos, with the first charging more with the trade of taking more. You can charge up to 4 of these bars, which I recommend you max out and use his third light combo. The dragon can fill the Kitsune gauge like nothing else, which is a bit shocking. Alright, I'll stop. And he also has a skill called Mantra, which enhances his ability to charge lightning. It doubles each charge, which means first light combo charges all the gauge. God damn. Lucci is the only Zoan that can switch between his two forms at will. While others transform during an attack, you can press L to switch between classy and rich women's coats. Some attacks differ, but his light combos are only in leopard form and heavy combos are only in human form. Both special attacks are similar, mostly for closer enemies. He's cool, I guess. Kuma can use both his Niku Niku no Mi powers to shoot pod-shaped projectiles, and his pacifista modifications to shoot lasers, and can even send enemies to Brazil. Both special attacks are fine, though Ursa Shock is much more effective. But I don't know if his first special attack gets more powerful the more damage you receive. That would be a cool detail. Ivanko can use his R action to enlarge the heads of his enemies, and make them bump into other enemies, which is cool. His first special attack, while not that good offensively, can heal you, which is also something Marco did, but I forgot to mention. Magellan can make poison hydras come out of the ground, and he obviously has a poisonous effect on enemies. He can even detach his horns to attack enemies. What? Both special attacks are fine, not much to comment. Caesar is one of the characters that I thought lows when I first played as him. They didn't grab me at first, but replaying him to record a script, yeah, he's pretty fun to use. He can throw candies, make smileys rain, and detonate them with your attack or the R action. Both special attacks are cool, I guess, and he's a good character after revisiting him. Kusan can freeze enemies and make large spikes and other things. His second special attack is quite cool. Ah, damn it! His R action is kicking enemies to shatter them when they're frozen. Oh yeah, T14s. I don't know, let me talk about Sabo. Sabo also has the Mera no Mi, like Ace, but he also utilizes Haki, and his Dragon Claw with just one attack being... God damn! he just crushed that schmuck's skull. His fire powers are also way better than Ace's. Like, this is Ace's Fire Fist, pathetic. And this is Sabo's Fire Fist. His second special attack, Dragon's Claw, Dragon's Breath. Well, to make the best nukes, you must evolve and become the nuke. His combos are pretty cool. His second light combo creates a pillar of fire that you can control and then teleport to wherever it is with the press of the R button. He's another one of my favorite characters. The combat as a whole is fun, but again, not very complex. You can probably spam 1 or 2 combos and it will still be considered optimal play. But I think its simplicity can help it, considering the target demographic for this game was One Piece fans, some of which might not be interested in schmooving like you do in other action games. It's still very fun to knock out entire armies, the whole selling point of Muso. Damn, that was long. How long do we have left? Well, let's move on to Legend Log, basically the story mode, and how it adapts to One Piece storyline. While also critiquing its gameplay aspects, I'll be mostly talking about its story and any such gimmick the level introduces. But I'll give you a rundown of how battles work.